Elizabeth Morgan, the immaculate CEO of Morgan Aviation, stood in the echoing private hangar at Westridge Regional Airport and laughed, an icy, cutting sound, when the grease-stained Jack Harlow calmly announced he could fix the grounded Gulfstream G650's Pratt & Whitney engine. "This isn't an oil change in a family sedan, Mr. Harlow," she said, voice dripping disdain. "That's a $15 million power plant. I need certified engineers, not handymen." The handful of local mechanics shifted awkwardly. No one spoke. Jack only wiped his hands on a rag, nodded once, and stepped back. What Elizabeth couldn't see beneath the worn coveralls was Dr. Jonathan Jack Harlow, once the aerospace world's most brilliant propulsion engineer, lead designer on classified military programs, recipient of medals now locked in a metal box under his bed. 5 years earlier, his wife Emma had died suddenly of an aneurysm. Their daughter Lily had been 7. Jack had walked away from everything. Patents, prestige, 7-figure contracts, to raise her in the quiet town of Westridge, working days at Miller's Auto Repair and every evening at the kitchen table helping with homework. Elizabeth, 42, MIT, Summa, Harvard, MBA, had spent her adult life proving she was tougher, smarter, and more ruthless than the men who had doubted a young woman could run an aviation empire. She had built Morgan Aviation into the Northeast's premier private jet charter firm, but the cost was absolute. No husband, no children, no life outside conference rooms and cockpits. Her only softness was a British short-hair cat named Churchill, and Thursday evenings alone in her Cirrus SR-22, that stormy Friday. Tech billionaire James Sullivan, her biggest client, was threatening to walk if his G650 wasn't airborne in 2 hours. Boston's certified team was grounded by weather. Diagnostics were baffling everyone. Except Jack. "It's not mechanical," he told Elizabeth quietly. "It's a software conflict between the new fuel management update and the emergency bypass protocol." She dismissed him until her own tablet confirmed he was exactly right. With Sullivan counting down minutes, pride warred with survival. She swallowed it. "Do it," she told Jack. "I'll watch every move." 13 minutes later, the engine purred perfectly. Sullivan boarded, satisfied. Jack packed his tools without a word of triumph. Later, alone in the break room, Elizabeth glimpsed the edge of a tattoo on Jack's arm when he reached for a paper towel. The classified cross-section of a never-released Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan variant. Only 16 people on Earth had ever seen that diagram. "That's the modified PW100OG military schematic," she said, stunned. Jack pulled his sleeve down. "Reminder of another life. You're Dr. Jonathan Harlow." "Was," he corrected. "Now I'm Lily's dad?" He told her, simply and without self-pity, about Emma's death and the choice he had made. Elizabeth drove back to headquarters unsettled, the image of a 12-year-old girl's school, certificates on a modest apartment wall competing with her own wall of magazine covers. 3 weeks later, another emergency. This time, Morgan Aviation's own showcase aircraft with proprietary modifications forced her back to Westridge. Corporate engineers were unavailable. She went straight to Miller's Auto Repair in her Aston Martin. Jack listened, rubbed the tattoo absent-mindedly, and finally agreed. On the condition Lily could do homework in the client lounge. They worked through the night in the hangar. Elizabeth traded her suit for borrowed coveralls. Jack treated her not as CEO, but as competent colleague. Between them sparked the easy shorthand of two people who think at the same speed. When she proposed an elegant workaround, he implemented it without ego and credited her openly. At midnight, he called Lily to say goodnight. Elizabeth watched through the office glass as the man who had just saved a multi-million-dollar contract laughed softly at something his daughter said, his whole face rearranging itself into unguarded tenderness. Afterward, she drove him home. He invited her up for coffee so I can check on Lily. The apartment was small, warm, alive with books and half-built science projects. On Lily's desk sat a flawless balsa wood model of a blended wing airframe annotated in a child's careful handwriting. Jack whispered, "She wants to design engines that don't burn fossil fuels. Says my generation dropped the ball." Elizabeth, who had never wanted children because they were incompatible with excellence, felt something crack inside her chest. In the weeks that followed, professional necessity became habit. Jack consulted remotely or on school-friendly hours. Elizabeth found herself inventing reasons to drive to Westridge. They argued over technical papers in a tiny bookstore cafe, Lily sometimes rolling her eyes from the next table. One afternoon, Elizabeth announced, "We're endowing a scholarship for young women in aerospace. Lily will be in the first cohort." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Trying to buy my daughter, Miss Morgan?" "Trying to give her the resources I never had," Elizabeth answered, and realized it was true. 6 months later, at Morgan Aviation's annual industry showcase, the centerpiece was a revolutionary hybrid propulsion system, co-developed on Jack's kitchen table after Lily's bedtime. In the corner, the young engineers exhibit featured 12-year-old Lily Harlow's award-winning sustainable fuel injector, already attracting university scouts. Elizabeth, in a charcoal suit, stood at the window of her office overlooking the bustling hangar. Jack came up behind her. "Having second thoughts about bringing the local mechanic to your gala?" he teased. She turned, took his hand. "The great Dr. Harlow adds credibility." "I'm not coming back full-time, Elizabeth." "Not even for you? I'm not asking you to." She squeezed his fingers. "We're building a new division, flexible hours, remote, built for parents who refuse to choose between family and changing the world." Jack studied her face. "That doesn't sound like the woman who laughed at me in the hangar." "She's learning," Elizabeth said quietly, "that some engines run best when they're not always at redline." Across the room, Lily glanced up from her display, saw their joined hands, and gave her father the smallest, most solemn nod of approval a 12-year-old can muster. Outside, private jets gleamed under spotlights and industry titans networked. But inside that office, 3 people stood in very different coveralls stood together. Proof that the most important journeys are not measured in altitude records or balance sheets, but in the quieter distance between who you were and who you finally allow yourself to become.